it grew out, and that's the last we'll hear about it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, those otherwise inclined. My name is TheMongol82, and welcome to this rather new series on this channel called What About This? This is a series where I will be going through different arcs, events, so on and so forth, even trying to predict stuff that goes on in the future for like wrestling, anime shows, all that sort of stuff, and seeing what I can do with seeing what I can do with what comes up. Now, this isn't meant to be I can do this better, I can do this a certain sort of way. Me being a writer, I like to explore different ideas and different processes and see what can come up, or see what can come out of these things, because they can be rather interesting. And yeah, so less about being able to, less about proving I'm better, more about let's see what we can do. Of course, that always sounds brilliant when the first topic we'll be going straight into is one that I haven't seen. As you can see in the title, it is the Pokémon Masters 8 tournament. But what is that? What could that be? Well, if you're new to that, obviously spoilers ahead, but we will be looking into how to vary such a exquisite process. And you get to look at my magnificent handsome mug while you're at it. But first, a recap. So, after conquering the Alolan League, his first traditional league victory, it's up to you if you want to include his Orange League victory as his first win or not, Ash returns home before learning about the World Coronation Series, and also getting tickets to the current tournament's final between the undefeated Leon and Lance, the Driftvale World Champion. Points to them to actually including that in there. Always looking for a new challenge, Ash registers and joins up for the next iteration of the tournament, starting at the normal rank where all first-time trainers to the Coronation Series start from, regardless of the status of said trainers, which also includes being the inaugural Alolan champion, and going through the numerous regions, building his team, and facing off against not just some old faces, but producing some new rivalries and new faces as well, climbs up from the normal rank, through the Great Rank, the Ultra Rank, all the way to the Masters Rank, finally defeating Raihan, who was in 8th place, and in defeating him, taking his spot, and finally ending up in the Masters rank. With the Masters 8, they then face off in a bracket knockout tournament to crown the new Monarch. His other competitors in the Masters 8, with Ash still being ranked 8th, are number 1, Leon, the reigning defending Monarch, and Galar's undefeated shooting star. Nearly said Galar, I'm an Aussie. Look for this fucking bird. That may be the trip up. Ranking number 2, Cynthia, Sinnoh's queen, and the the inflictor of PTSD among many young trainers around the world. Ranking number 3, Stephen Stone, the Helgen champion, seemingly for the first time. We'll get to that. 4th, Lance, last year's last tournament's runners-up, and potentially still Driftvale City World Champion. Who knows? Ranking number 5, Diantha, the Angel of Kalos and Kalos' own champion. Celebrity to all. Somewhat undersold by some. We'll get to that. Ranking number 6, Iris, the new Unova champion to some people's dismay. And 6th was Alan, the Kalos League winner who stopped Ash in the final, but not Unova champion yet. 7th, Iris skipped a step. Ash, on his way through the tournament, knocked out Stephen in the quarterfinals, ranked number 3, Cynthia in the semi-finals, ranked number 2, and finally defeating the undefeatable, he can bleed, Leon, ranking number 1, on his way to being crowned the Monarch and effectively taking up a world champion position. For the most part, the execution, from my understanding anyway, looking into stuff, the tournament is a good idea. It's a novel concept. Anyone who's spent enough time in the fandom knows that, and certainly looking through fanfiction, knows that this is an idea that gets toyed around with a bit. Not necessarily the Monarch, but a grand world tournament to decide who's the best of the best. That, in and of itself, is a novel idea. It presents a new challenge, a new step for Ash on his way to his master, or on his way to becoming a Pokemon master, excuse me. But the execution could have maybe been a bit better. In particular, things that get levied are the semi-final between Leon and Diantha, and a certain amount of the choices that Cynthia made, particularly in her battle with Ash. Also, a little bit of the presentation on Leon, such as his overwhelming power, crushing his way through Alan, crushing his way through Diantha, to then have the battle that he ended up having. So, what can we do? Well, let's see, shall we? So, when it comes to how you want to revamp this, how you want to look at this, there's a few things you need to consider, especially from a tournament perspective. Firstly, you need to look at what kind of tournament you want to do. The two standard ones that are worth looking at are Knockout Tournament, which is what they did. Sorry, Bracket Tournament, I should say, instead of just straight Knockout. But it still works the same way, you know what I mean. Or a league format, a round robin format. And both have their merits. A bracket tournament is faster, so from a development point of view, it's less time to build up. Well, it's less time to focus on battles. It's shorter. It's simpler. You don't have to do as much. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily indicate that the person who wins it is out and out the best. They can deal with what's in front of them, but potentially somebody else who is a better matchup for them could get knocked out by somebody who's a better matchup for them instead, and therefore it gets a bit murky. On the flip side, a league tournament allows you to have everyone go up against multiple people. Realistically, you should do everyone against everyone at least once, and that gives a much better indication of who is actually the best. You can still do a knockout towards the end. You could do, for argument's sake, first through fourth, run a semi-final that way, and then formulate your way through there, and that ultimately sorts out a premiership or a overall winner. It allows a bit of variation of, okay, you were able to beat this person on this day, but there could be something different the next time you go through. It's not necessarily complete one and done. Both have their merits. Obviously the league tournament would be longer, which, knowing the Pokemon company's track record on dealing with time, they're not necessarily known for giving things time. Maybe they're starting to give it a chance now, who knows. But for this, because this is the first time I'm doing something like this, I'm going to give you both. We'll start with the bracket, and then we'll do the league. Before that though, the other stuff we need to address. First things first, the Masters 8, the 8 that are there in canon, they will all be participating in both formats. I will not be getting rid of anyone out of those. I may add some people in though. Just wait for that. The other thing to consider is, what narrative do you want? You need stuff going in. Obviously Ash is already there. Ash is looking to be the best, and looking to win the tournament, looking to progress his journey to being a Pokemon Master, as abstract a concept as that is, which you're, well, depending on how valid the leak was, you may know if you've looked into some of those Game Freak leaks. Beyond that, what can you do? Well, it depends on stuff like how much time are you going to give the tournament, what type of tournament are you going to do, and in terms of how much you can actually go into each character's motivations. Why do they want to do this? Now, you can slap bang we want to be the world champion, we want to be the reigning monarch across the spiel, that's fine. Leon's still pushing his undefeated run, he's still out to prove he's the best. Cynthia's narrative in canon is interesting. Her looking to retire, I would actually keep. I would keep that in both forms. I'll come back to that as to what I would do with that differently though. Dianthus you can play off a bit. Her being a lower ranked, you could also attribute to her having a schedule, her still needing to do filming and all that sort of stuff. That allows her to be involved in less battles, have a lower ranking without necessarily diminishing her ability. With Steven, you could go about exploring his need to potentially continue to prove himself. It depends on how long he's actually been the Hoenn champion now. I did sort of explain later. The interesting thing is Steven, as far as I can recall, through Ash's journeys in Hoenn, was never introduced as the Hoenn champion. It was never brought up. The first time a Hoenn champion was ever mentioned was Wallace during Diamond and Pearl. So this might be Hoenn's first stint in anime universe as champion. Iris is obviously new to this. She's again looking to prove herself. This is a good spot to cementing your legacy as a champion, cementing your power, your position, show that you're not going to be somebody who can be easily dealt with. Alan has always been looking to deal with powerful trainers. This is obviously the best place to deal with that. As for Lance, well, Lance is looking for retribution. Just came up short last time. He wants to conquer Leon, he wants to conquer the tournament. This would be the crown jewel in his cap, so to speak. But who else to bring in? Well, obviously if we're going for a bracket tournament, we need to add in at least another 8 to make a round of 16, or we could push it for a 24 and make it a round of 32 and go forwards from there. That's probably a bit too much for this, but we will go for a round of 16. So we need to bring in 8 people. Who are the 8 we're going to bring in? Well, let's start off with the Elite 4 members I would bring in. Number 1, Raihan. Raihan makes a certain amount of sense to bring in anyway. He was already around that level. Ash has to beat him to get into the Masters 8, so the way you can cement that is maybe Ash beating him doesn't put Ash into the top 8, but it puts Ash into the top 16. From there, if you really want to make places matter, you can do the seeding where the top 8 get drawn against the bottom 8 for the first round, and then randomise it or what have you. Ash beating Raihan not only puts Ash into the top 16, it drops Raihan out of the top 16, and Raihan has to then beat somebody else to reclaim that spot right at the very end. He gets there on like the last day. Raihan obviously still wants to bring down Leon. This is, as Gala tends to put it, this is Raihan's dream. He needs to bring down Leon. This is his drive. Number 2, I would bring in somebody from Sinnoh, one of the Sinnoh Elite 4, and it makes much more sense for it to be Flint for a few reasons. One, Flint's already involved in canon anyway, and from a canon perspective, Flint was in the Masters 8 for the majority of the tournament, as far as we can tell. So he would be up there in rank anyway. Plus, if you're running with the Cynthia retirement angle still, having somebody who looks like they could be a contender to take over, that's not a bad thing to have. It gives a little bit of a niggle of what could come next. You already have a stepping stone in place. Yes, if you're going down the game perspective, some of you may think more Lucian, but I think Flint makes a bit more sense at the moment. Flint's always been a bit more battle hardened, let's say. Plus, certainly through Diamond and Pearl, he seemed to be presented as the one who had the best chance out of all of them to bring down Cynthia. Still unsuccessful, but the best chance. For the 3rd Elite 4 member, I would actually pick somebody from the Johto League. For a few reasons. One, as far as I can tell, both Will and Karen have not been showcased in the anime, so if you want to go for either of them, that could be a good way of introducing them into the franchise, giving them a bit more of a personality, showing them off, seeing what they can do. Koga would be a fantastic choice, being able to explore the idea of somebody who's gone from that gym leader spot to a Elite Four position is a really interesting idea. So this could be a perfect way of documenting that. If you go down that route, then Janine absolutely has to show up sometime earlier in the series as the Fuchsia City gym leader. She doesn't necessarily have to go up against Ash, but have it been known at some point that this is the area that we're at. And obviously Bruno is always going to be up there. Bruno, bearing in mind, if we're counting Lance as being a champion of 2 regions, realistically we have to count Bruno as being an Elite Four of 2 regions, which has to have a certain amount of strength to it. They're all decent options, but I think for the narrative I would actually pick Bruno. Again, have that notion of being an Elite Four member in 2 regions requires a decent amount of strength, so that should mean something. Maybe he's the top contender to take one of the champion positions from Lance, though that could potentially form its own conundrum. There is another reason I would pick Bruno as well, more on that later. That would end the Elite Four members I would bring in, so the 4th person I would bring in would be Wallace. Obviously the former Hoenn champion, he should have a champion team anyway, even if he's taken a step back into the Sutopolis City gym position. The man still is strong enough to be a champion. Like, that doesn't just go away. That's the sort of thing you should lean into. He was highly ranked when he took on Ash anyway, slightly below, if I recall my research well enough. It was slightly below the 16 ranks, but he should be able to easily get up there anyway. Number 5, and this brings in a narrative change, Older. This addresses a few things. Number 1, Older is still the Unova champion. So you'll get less complaints about Iris became champion before Ash, or these sort of weird and crazy bloody things people want to go on about. The 2 complaints about Iris was, 1, she's championed too quickly, or she's championed before Ash, and 2, we didn't get to see it. So what you can do with that is Iris still wins the Unova League off screen, that's fine. There's no point in changing that. She could have battled her way through the Elite Four and have earned her championship shot against Older. But before they could do that match, the Coronation Series began. And by the behest of Older has told Iris she should compete. After all, if you can win this Coronation Series, well, beating this old bat should be no problem then. So, Iris can still go in as a way of proving herself. Older's there potentially to go out on his shield. It certainly at the very least gives him a nice warm-up for a championship bout, and by that point you can do a bit more with that. That ends the former champions, so that leaves us with 3 more positions, 3 more that can be a bit more wild card. Number 1, or technically number 6, Paul. Because why the fuck is he not there? Like, yes, he was there in the series, but you didn't have him compete in the tournament. You didn't have him compete. Like, to be fair, I do like the idea of Paul struggling to realise what he wants to do next. His entire shtick before is this search of strength, this search of a battling style. This opportunity presents him an idea to explore something more. That doesn't necessarily mean he has to take it, and you can still run that with him competing in the tournament. That's not a big change. In fact, having him in the tournament is probably a better way of handling it. The man has to figure out where he sits. So, have him in the tournament. I would also say there is another reason why he does not, or he hasn't necessarily made a decision yet. More on that later. Option number 7, I would have a Battle Frontier member, or a Battle Liaison in there. Regardless of what some people in the Pokemon Company think about the Battle Frontier, it is still a very popular section of the game. It is still a very popular part of the franchise. It represents the challenge that people still want in the games, and narratively, there's still stuff you can do there. Now, obviously, similar to whether you want to pick Will or Karen, if you want to go down that path, there are liaison members you can pick that haven't been on screen that can be used to be established. No, I would not pick Inigo. I'm sorry. I know he's popular, especially because of Legends Arceus now, but I would not be picking either of the twins. Instead, there are 3 people I think would be the best contender for this position. One's Palmer. Palmer could represent another person who could potentially become Sinnoh champion after Cynthia. More on that later. Depending on how intimately you connect the movies to the anime in terms of canon, and the Sinnoh ones have always been a bit more akin to canon than the rest of the films, especially the newer ones, then you will know that Palmer has had, at the very least, an exhibition match with Cynthia, if not a championship match, so he's already around that sort of strength anyway. Second option, Brandon. For nothing else, there are 2 new Reggies. Why would he not be interested in exploring that? That is right up his alley, and regardless, he doesn't even necessarily need to have Regice, Regirock and Registeel either. The rest of his team is already around that sort of strength and power anyway, and he proves that against Ash in his 3rd battle with Ash. It's not necessarily do and done. Whether he has a legendary or not, he's always going to be a formidable opponent, and it makes sense for him to be in and around Galar anyway. Third option, Annabelle. You heard me. A few reasons. One, why the hell is she not in the Sun and Moon anime? It made perfect sense for her to be there. Now, you don't necessarily have to address any Flawless stuff, but even then, she was intricately tied to the Ultra Beasts. It made sense for her to turn up there. What you can do, say again, you don't have to go into any of the Flawless stuff, but what you can do is you can keep her as part of the International Police. In fact, lean into that a bit more. You could go, after the Team Flare incident in Kalos, the International Police wants to keep a closer eye on the Elite Fours and the Champions, considering Mulver's involvement with the Flare incident. So the best way to do that is to have one of their best agents go into the tournament and get as far as they can and keep an eye on stuff at the highest level. Annabelle is a very good option to do that. Furthermore, if you want to go down her amnesia route as well, you can do that. You could have her feelings for Ash help spark some recovery in her. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to any Ultra Beast stuff. You can have a workaround for that. Also, she is outside of companions and rivals, she's actually one of the more popular ships for Ash. Just a little needle in you, Aura shippers. Hi there. Obviously, they'd never bite that bullet, let's be frank. They didn't with Serena, they didn't with Misty, they aren't going to do it here. Much to my amusement. So I think those are the 3 best contenders from a Battle Frontier perspective. Narratively, I think Annabelle is actually the more interesting one, but I think she would fit a league format more than a bracket format. It depends on how much time you want to spend on it. For the sake of the narrative, I would go Brandon. It's a slightly simpler choice, but it does still work. Lastly, well, this one I had a bit of deliberation over. My initial thought was, what I want is another league winner in this. That should represent the best option for somebody who can push them. Not necessarily take the whole thing, but somebody who can push them. Now, I know what you're thinking. No, it is not Tobias. I think, and that's not even I'm not hugely against Tobias being around, but I think a large amount of his involvement now and his appeal now, is the sheer mystery in the guy. So you don't need to have him there. In fact, you barely need to mention him. The only thing you really need to do if you want to mention him is have either Flint or Cynthia say he has not challenged Cynthia. Hell, he hasn't even challenged the Elite Four. The Champions League opportunity that he won by winning the Sinnoh League, he has not taken. He just vanished. And if anyone, it's Cynthia, being somebody who has an understanding on the legends and the myths and all that sort of stuff, would be wanting to keep an eye on somebody who's got a Darkrai and a Latios, but instead the man just vanished. Last they heard, he took on another league just before the Coronation Series started, blitzed through it like he did in Sinnoh, and then vanished again. He has not taken on a single battle in the Coronation Series. They don't know why. Realistically, that's all you have to do with Tobias. You keep the mystery there, you don't necessarily have to address stuff. While this is the end of Ash as a protagonist, as the main protagonist, this isn't necessarily a way of writing Ash out for good. He could still come back. You still want a little bit of stuff that he could do, both dealing with future games but also past games. And in doing that, it's probably best that something like Tobias could be left open-ended. You don't have to answer everything. So, if Tobias is out, then who do we have? I think there were two people I was mulling over more so than anything. One was Tyson. Tyson won the Hoenn League when Ash competed there. He just beat Ash in the quarterfinals by an absolute sliver before going on to win the entire thing. Tyson represents somebody who's a bit more strategic in his battling sense, understands different battling styles and implements them rather well with his rather diverse team. He's somebody that could be a very big boon to being in this tournament. The other person I was considering was Virgil. Virgil, if you are scratching your head at that, Virgil is the person who won the Unova League. Obviously, the less said about the Unova League, the better. That thing was not executed well at all. But Virgil gives you a little bit of an interesting branch in that. A rescue worker, a Pokemon rescue worker. He has a team full of Eevee and Eeveelutions. You could use that. He could now have a Sylveon, for example. Maybe even another Eevee in there to facilitate the Sylveon. And then he's also rather marketable, what with their push on having Eevee be more front anyway. Especially with Eevee's popularity, having somebody who's competing with a team full of Eevee and Eeveelutions, not necessarily a bad idea. Of the two of them though, I think Tyson is the better option, and Tyson was going to be my 8th, until I got to thinking. And I wondered when the Masters 8 series took place. When were the episodes all released? And that got me thinking, and I had a look in regards to something else. What do you want? If this is truly going to be Ash stepping away, not for good, but stepping away, why not use this to help facilitate what comes next? Why not use this to branch into who comes up next, to set the stage for the next series? It doesn't necessarily have to be your next protagonist, but this can help sell your next games, your next this, your next that. And I checked. Scarlet and Violet came out, worldwide release, was the day that the final episode of Ash and Leon's battle was also released. So it matches up. Your 8th participant in this bracket tournament, your final addition to this bracket tournament, is Nimona. You bloody heard me. A champion level trainer. You can still do what you need to do with her anyway, but a champion level trainer who can stand on her own, who has already drawn comparisons to Ash in her passion for battling, in her wild temperament. Nimona fits this like a glove. If you can't get that to work, obviously it requires a bit of work between the studio who's working on the anime, the Pokemon company itself, and Game Freak, and in trying to tie things together and make sure things work. If you can't get that to work, I would pick Tyson, but for the purposes of this tournament that I'm going to go through, Nimona rounds out the participants. Now, if you're that concerned about placing, what you can do is, as I said, top 8 get drawn against bottom 8. So you can still have battles in between people in the Masters throughout the tournament to solidify positions. There is an advantage to doing that. So you could also do 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, 3 versus etc. And that's how you get it up. And if you want to be really stringent with it, but top half, bottom half, that works. And that's how we'll facilitate this one. For that to work, I will have Ash, Iris, Alan, and Diantha drop out of the top 8 into 9 through 16, with the 4 going up being Alder, Brandon, Bruno, and Flint. Facilitate that. You can pick whatever positions you want for them, though arguably Cynthia and Leon should still be 1 and 2. So, with that, where do we go from the battles? Well, actually, there's one other thing I should address. It's to do with Cynthia, because this is something you need to run from the start, pretty much from the start of the series, and run it all the way through. You don't need to confirm her retiring. You don't have to confirm that she's looking to retire immediately. What you do is you present a few different things, and this should also help with how the tournament gets perceived. IRL, not just in-universe. Because probably one of the bigger constraints around this when it first happened was, feasibly, the only 2 people who could really win this tournament were Ash and Leon. They were the 2. Cynthia was a distinct third, and then everyone else had pretty much no chance. Ash, Leon, Cynthia was a dark horse, nobody else was winning. So, here's what you do to try and help that. You have rumours abound throughout, crowd noise, throughout, reporting in background. You don't necessarily need it to be outright, but little snippets here and there, little mutterings. Some people may catch on, some people won't. Some of this will be true, some of this will just be rumour. But it's enough to bring in a bit more intrigue. So, here's what you would do. Cynthia has not taken part in the previous World Coronation series. The one which crowned Leon as the monarch, Cynthia did not take part in. And I would actually go, if you want to facilitate her being burnt out even further, Cynthia has not taken part in the previous 2. This is somebody with a legitimate claim to being the strongest trainer in the world who has not competed. What this does is this keeps Cynthia and Leon away. Because that's probably the biggest threat outside of Ash to Leon is Cynthia. There's no disputing that. So sell it harder that these 2 have not gone up against each other. Even further, you can report that Cynthia and Leon have not competed against each other, full stop. Not in the World Coronation series, not in the Drift Rail World Championship, not even in a exhibition match. Anytime something could maybe build between the 2, something happens to make it fall apart. Whether it's on Cynthia's end, whether it's on Leon's end, whether it's an administration thing, what have you. In terms of keeping Cynthia away, that's where you can throw in some rumours. You could be like, oh, maybe she was still dealing with the Team Galactic incident. Maybe she was still working on an archaeological dig. She's got ways of being away from it without necessarily outright going, she's burning out. What this also helps, though, is that if she's still burning out, if she's still using her battling passion even after missing these tournaments, this may not be something that's easily changed. The next thing that can get brought up, run this as a rumour that gets confirmed later on. She registered for the tournament on the deadline day. You can make the argument that all the champions, or at least all the previous masters, get a automatic invitation to the tournament. Weird why that was the word that I couldn't think of. An automatic invitation to the tournament. They just have to confirm that they want to take part. Cynthia only did it on the deadline day, but that gets muttered. Nobody's entirely sure about that, because the one that does get confirmed about being on the deadline day is Diantha, and Diantha makes sense to do that for. She needs to figure out her schedule. She needs to make sure her schedule with her being an actress, with her being a model, all that sort of stuff, can accommodate her still taking part in this tournament. That is something that makes sense. Cynthia's is a bit murky. From there, don't confirm that she's retiring. You do not confirm she's retiring until the Masters tournament itself. That is when you address a bit more of this stuff. So how do we want to run this bracket tournament? Well, certainly from a studio perspective, one, pick the fucking battles you want to show. You don't have to show every battle, you can just do highlights and stuff. It's easy to show every battle for a bracket tournament anyway, and this is sort of the tournament that if you are going to show every battle, you can kind of do that because there's going to be a lot of intrigue here anyway. Whether you're into it or not, this is always the sort of thing that fascinates people. Like, look at the World Cup, for God's sake. Like, there's a reason these events get brought up as big as they are. And realistically, if you're going to base Gala on England anyway, or the British Isles, then this is always going to be treated as a big deal anyway. So, battle number 1. Defending reigning monarch Leon up against Alan. Yeah, you keep that there. You can keep it relatively the same. I know the treatment of Alan's Charizard, especially considering how Alan beat Ash in Kalos, annoyed some people. I'd still keep the battle relatively the same. You can make it a 6-2, 6-3 if you desperately need to, but the point of it is that even in this, even in a Master setting, it still looks like Leon's warming up. He hasn't really gotten out of second gear, and yet he blitzed through this battle. This helps showcase him being somebody who relies on overwhelming power and, to some extent, critical hit strength, which is arguably what Diantha's battle was in canon was supposed to showcase. Just the execution was a bit off there. But basically, yeah, keep it about the same. Leon blitzes through this. Battle number 2, Raihan versus Cynthia. Now, with Leon absolutely blitzing through Alan, you can have the Gala media, the Gala crowd, home field going, oh, this is great, this is perfect. You play into the perception that Game Freak threw in-game about Raihan being that he's so powerful, he could be the champion of any region, and use that to sell the intrigue of this. He could be the champion of any region if he wanted to, but he's so fixated on defeating Leon that that's what he wants to do. He should be able to bring down Cynthia. He should be able to push her and then have Cynthia utterly dismantle the lad. 6-2, 6-1, hell, make it a whitewash. Some of you may be thinking that's strange. Here's why. 1. Again, Gala's based off of the British Isles, specifically England, and the battling of the battling within the stadiums, it facilitates the football over there. If you have any idea about English media when it comes to football, and it's sort of across the board from a British Isles perspective, they have a tendency of overhyping their own talent, their homegrown talent, compared to everywhere else. So as much as they want to brag, oh, he's so powerful, in the face of somebody like Cynthia, he should stand no chance. Reason number 2, if somebody that is supposed to be that powerful, that skillful, and bearing in mind Cynthia's not going to underestimate him, she didn't against Paul, stands no chance against Cynthia, no wonder she is losing that passion for battle. Number 3, whether you can still keep Leon being a bit happy-go-lucky, you can still keep Leon being confident, but it puts that little bit of intrigue, that little note into his mind. What is meant to be his greatest rival, certainly locally, got brought apart and taken apart with ease by somebody he is yet to face. That then elevates Cynthia's chances. That makes her look like a real threat. Somebody who could bring down Leon. Battle number 3 in the round of 16, Diantha versus Lance. You can basically keep that the same. It gives Diantha a much needed win from a perception point of view. And also, similar to what Cynthia's victory does, puts another message into Leon's mind. This is not the same tournament you won last time. Somebody you have yet to face has brought down your greatest rival, and now the runner-up of the previous tournament is out round 1. This is not the same tournament you won last time. Sell that as your sticking point. And again, this is a victory that, as far as I could tell, perception-wise, when I was looking through stuff, people seem to enjoy. Like, this was a victory she fucking needed to build her perception with the fan base. Good job. Battle number 4, Iris versus Older. This is where you run Iris's Unova champion match. Have Older put his championship on the line right now because, well, this is probably as good a place as any to do it. You have no reason to run from it, you have no reason to hide from it. Older can get it done out of the way. We might as well run it here and now. And here is where Iris gets the victory, a hard-fought victory, a hard-earned victory. Iris becomes the new Unova champion. You dismiss the complaints about Iris not winning it on screen and winning it before Ash. We get to see it, we get to enjoy it, Ash gets to enjoy it with her, and Older can basically go out on his shield. This can be the point where Older himself retires, while using that as a bit more of the smokescreen to fuel Cynthia's. Battle number 5, Wallace versus Stephen, the Battle of the Hoenn Masters. And this should be close. On paper, this should be a fairly decent victory for Stephen, but if all you do is look at game logic to try and understand the anime, you're gonna fall short every single time. Wallace's coordinator style, his unusual tendencies and crafty creative strategies should work around Stephen's hard strength and solid defences. This should be a 6-5 victory to Stephen. Or 3-2, depends on how you want to operate them. Regardless, Stephen should win on his last Pokemon, not before. Yes, I've swapped over to the beers. Yes, Aussie, yada yada, Aussie's alcohol, yada yada yada. It's fucking hot. It's a hot day, it's gonna get hotter. Battle number 6, I would actually run Paul versus Brandon here. Lean into their previous history with each other. You can bring in Reggie as well to help fuel this, Paul's older brother. But this is one of the biggest tests for Paul. Maybe he's been taking on the Kanto Battle Frontier in his own time. Maybe he got invited to take on the Sinnoh Battle Frontier. But the one sticking thorn in his side has been, and even one of the biggest catalysts for his change, was when he got stomped down by Brandon in Sinnoh. It was a whitewash, he only used his 3 Reggies, and it was the same thing that basically brought down Reggie as well. The best way to help Paul develop is to get this battle again. And this is where Paul wins. His newly crafted style, him having found a battling style, him having honed it throughout the tournament, this finally allows him to get the victory against a man who is very, very powerful. But you can have Brandon give Paul his frontier symbol at the end of it as well if you really want to. That's up to you. But here Paul gets the victory. I would also cycle back a little bit. Before this battle, Cynthia meets up with Paul. Cynthia knows about the offer put into Paul, about Paul potentially becoming gym leader, like have that be clear here, and she asks him where his head is at, and all that sort of stuff. She's curious. This is where Paul asks why she told him to hold off on making a decision. This is when you first officially address Cynthia retirement. Paul asks her if she is, if the rumours about her retiring are true. She says she agreed, or she admits, says she plans on retiring at the end of this tournament. Whether she wins or not, she plans on being done with battling. So why did she ask Paul to hold off on her decision? Because chances are there'll be a vacancy in the Elite Four. If she steps down, she expects that one of the Sinnoh Elite Four will rise up and take her place as champion. So there should be a vacancy in the Elite Four. And she thinks, out of everyone, Paul could be the best suited to take that place. Still, nothing gets officially revealed to the media, but you put that in now. You don't do it just before her battle with Ash. You do it now. You do it now to put that in the audience's mind, and then you officially, in-universe, officially release that info slightly later. Anyway, Paul wins. Battle number 7. Nimona versus Flint. And Nimona should win here. Flint is a good match for Nimona for a couple of reasons. One, this helps solidify Nimona being similar to Ash. Yes, a lot of the comparisons to her being similar to Ash came after the game was released. It was always sort of there. Don't shy away from it. Don't shy away from it, run with it. And Flint, being somebody who has battled Ash before and has kept an eye on him, would be in a good position to not only note that and see that for himself, but can also lay that off to other people, say Cynthia. Think about what happened in canon. So Nimona gets a victory here. Her, again, being a champion level trainer, that should mean something. That should actually be shown. And this helps present Nimona as credible. Which leaves for our final battle of the round of 16, Ash versus Bruno. This is the other reason that I said Bruno should be involved in this tournament. Bruno is somebody that Ash would have absolutely looked up to growing up. Wanting to be a trainer, he obviously looked up to Lance, he looked up to people in the Kanto region. Bruno would absolutely be one of those. It's also been a long time since we've seen Bruno, and Bruno would be a very good harken back to a certain amount of where Ash started. Ash gets the victory over Bruno over a hard-fought match. Maybe even his giant Onyx has evolved into a Steelix by this point as well, just to sell things a bit further. But yeah, Ash gets the victory here. So that leaves going into the quarterfinals, Leon, Cynthia, Diantha, Nimona, Steven, Ash, Iris, and Paul. Those 8. For the quarterfinals, match number 1, Leon versus Diantha. This is where you sort of run the same battle that you did in canon. It makes a bit more sense now to do that, with the messages that both Diantha and Cynthia have basically sent to him, whether they meant to or not. Leon needs to show that he can step up that gear here and now, and what better to do that than to take down the person who defeated his previous runner-up. Yes, it doesn't necessarily have to be 6-2. You do a better job of showing that it is overwhelming strength. That's just not a good matchup for Diantha's style. That's probably the best way to phrase it. It doesn't have to be 6-2. You can still make it 6-3 or 6-4. She is still a champion as opposed to Alan, but it still should be a somewhat comfortable victory. It's still a bit of struggle, but there shouldn't be a doubt that it's Leon's victory. Battle number 2, I would go Ash vs Paul, run it fucking back. Of course you do. It's still highly regarded as one of the best battles the anime's ever produced. Run it back. Hell, switch Ash's team up, for goodness sake. Use the Pokemon that he's got that can be at that level. Go for it. And Ash comes out the winner here. There isn't really any doubt there, but this should help solidify Paul's decisions and give him a good planting ground. It kind of works. A good patch to grow further later on. Whether you do that on screen or not, that's up to you. Battle number 3, Cynthia versus Iris. Again, basically run the same battle you did in canon. Iris, now the new Unova champion, tries and tries her very best, but she's just not at that level that Cynthia is at. No matter how hard she tries, no matter what tricks she can pull out, no matter how much she may try and pull out some of Ash's unique charms, if you want to do that, realistically, Cynthia wins this. Cynthia should win it, and should win it fairly comfortably. Finally, Nimona versus Steven, and I would have Nimona win this one. Have her battle a bit like Ash, have her battle a bit more uniquely, certainly tenaciously, and this absolutely helps sell her needing to be at this level. Please understand, she won the championship before, she became a champion level trainer before the events in Scarlet and Violet. This isn't something that's out of nowhere. Her starting again was her wanting to run that with somebody new, somebody she wanted to build a rivalry with. Not necessarily that she had to, because she is damn good in her own right. Nimona gets the victory here, further selling how good she is. So your semi-finalists, Leon, Ash, Cynthia, Nimona. Now, the battle you do here entirely depends on what final you want. Now, obviously, there are pretty much only two finals. You've done all this to build up Nimona. You don't need Nimona to make the final. You can if you want. It'll be an interesting way to strap the rocket to her right out of the gate. But I don't think Nimona fits being in the final. You've done pretty much what you need to sell how good she is. You give her the character development away from the battling. You've done what you need to with Nimona. Pretty much your final is either going to be Ash vs Leon or Ash vs Cynthia. Now, if you're going to go Ash vs Leon, you run Ash vs Cynthia here, and you have Leon versus Nimona, and that should be 6-4, 6-5, probably more 6-4. Ash versus Cynthia should be a 6-5 affair, but I would actually run, from a bracket perspective, Ash vs Cynthia as the final, which means Ash beats Leon in the semi-final. Why? Because, and this was sort of the perception going into the Masters tournament from the fandom anyway, was the most interesting battle that was in that, from a logistic setup, was Ash versus Cynthia. Either one of them could have won that match, on paper. Ash versus Leon, Ash kind of had to win. You could certainly see them not pulling the trigger, but Ash kind of needed to win that one. Leon versus Cynthia, Leon probably wins that, even though you'll have a decent section of the fandom crying out for Cynthia to fucking kick his ass. Ash versus Cynthia is, even with Ash bringing down Leon in the process of getting there, is the more interesting matchup. So Ash beats Leon in the semi-finals. What you can do there, and the reason why I think it's slightly more interesting in doing that is, yes, Ash has brought down the invincible Leon. He should win this, shouldn't he? Well, not entirely. Ash still gets a huge takeaway, stopping the man who was unstoppable. There were ways of playing around that without necessarily him needing to win the tournament. That is still a huge feather in Ash's cap. Cynthia could still win the tournament, go out with a bang. Ash beats Leon, Nimona beats Cynthia. By the end of the round of 16, I should have mentioned that before, that's when the media announces whether Cynthia actually talked to them or not, or how they got that information. It is officially announced that Cynthia is intending to retire by the end of the tournament. That's sort of the running story now. Well, that's the running story down that side of the bracket anyway. Cynthia's battle with Nimona can start that spark of her battling passion again. Not quite the same, but she would absolutely notice similarities between Nimona and Ash. Cynthia still goes into the battle with Ash with the intention that she is going to retire. Win or lose, she intends to retire still. But there's that little niggle in the back of her head. And even then, before the battle, Ash can ask if she's still sure. She's relatively sure. For Ash, it would be an absolute honour and an absolute pleasure to be Cynthia's last battle. Cynthia can bring up that this is probably the battle that she was most looking forward to out of this entire thing. And honestly, that's probably the truth anyway, even in canon. But relatively run the same battle that you did in the anime. You can address the Dynamax thing if you really want. You can still make it the Mega Evolution. Obviously, give Garchomp a bit more variation to its moveset. Ash goes over. You can make the call whether or not Cynthia retires or not. I kind of like the idea of her not. I think it's still probably a bit too early to run that, but what you can do if you want to go down that path is, this is where the Sinnoh League administration starts looking into, okay, who is, well, she may not have retired now, we need to have a number one contender in place, so to speak, or at least a contingency. Ash wins, Ash gets the Monarch spot, and he can ride off into the sunset much as he did. So that basically handles the bracket tournament. Now let's go into the league, shall we? Now, league, round robin, everyone faces everyone, so you at least, even if you just stuck with the initial Masters 8, that's still everyone doing 7 battles. What you need to consider is, how are you going to do your separations for the league? Are you going to, like, how many points do you give for a win? Do you have any points for a draw? What are your tiebreakers? All that sort of stuff. And obviously, if you're going to do it full-blooded, you need to know what your fixture is. In terms of what battles do you show, you still probably show all of Ash's, you at least show the significant ones of Ash, but you definitely don't have to show every battle. Even in just the Masters 8, you're still showing about, well, I was going to say 49 battles, but that's not right. 7 rounds, 4 battles each, so 28 battles you'll be showing. No need to do that. Are we going to add more people to this? Yes. 2. Rounded out to 10. Who are the 2 that I would bring in? 1, Wallace. Wallace still being up there, I think makes more sense to put him in there, plus being the former champion, I believe gives him slightly more of an edge than having Raihan in there. Yes, that means Raihan's not the 10th person in there. I would still have that be Nimona. Again, use this to make that impact. If you can't get Nimona, then Raihan fills out your 10th spot. I'm not going to go into every single battle. I actually did at one point, like, just to map out results to make sure my league table worked. But for now, here is how the league table will work. 2 for a win, 1 for a draw if necessary. If people are tied, it goes to knockout difference, so the number of Pokemon you've knocked out compared to the number of your Pokemon knocked out. If that's still level, knockout, then whoever's knocked out more Pokemon is on top. If that's all the same, what was the head-to-head battle? If it gets down to it, you do a sudden death one-on-one battle to separate it if you need to. For the sake of that, how this round-robin tournament will work, so obviously you've got 10 people taking part, everyone plays everyone, top 4 go into a semi-final with 1st versus 4th, 2nd versus 3rd, nearly said 5th, and the winners of those play off in the final to crown the Monarch. It gives you enough of a workaround to give a, well, this is probably the strongest trainer here, whilst also delivering that that there is a second chance. You don't have to win every time, you could still lose one and get back in there. We won't go into the final league table just yet. Let's go through some important events. Round number 1, Leon versus Ash right out of the gate. Now, I know how I talked about before that the invincibility can be a bit of a hindrance. Having somebody who's undefeated is an interesting concept to have in a tournament. You can have them go on a rampage throughout, but it can also hinder potential winners. There are a lot of times where the best tournaments are the ones that have as many people as possible able to win. Similarly with the bracket tournament, I was very tempted to have Ash vs Leon round 1 and have Ash beat Leon out of the gate, get rid of that invincibility from the start, and you could maybe do it here as well. But instead, Ash vs Leon, Leon wins round 1. It could still be 6-3, 6-4, really 6-5 if you really want to, but I wouldn't have it be 6-5. 6-3, 6-4 is about right. Ash starts out with a loss. It's not be all end all. It is still decent. No, like there's still plenty of matches to go ahead, but Leon starts out on top. Ash starts picking up a couple of victories. He gets the win over Alan, getting vengeance for Kalos. Personally, I wasn't that perturbed by that result, to be fair, but I'm aware what a lot of people think. But he gets his win over Alan, he gets a win over Iris, and we'll say he gets a win over Wallace here as well, going down through rounds 2, 3, and 4, probably in that order, which then gets into round 5, about the halfway point of the tournament. He goes up against Cynthia. Cynthia, similar to Leon by this point, is undefeated. Actually, by this point, I would also have Steven be undefeated by this stage as well. Ash goes up against Cynthia. Ash loses to Cynthia. You can still run the Cynthia retirement stuff. You've got a lot more time to eke this out if you really need to. So you can play into stuff a bit more. Also, I should bring up, with there not being an older in this tournament, Iris is the Unova champion going into this. Don't play around with that. But after round 5, with Ash losing to Cynthia, Ash is on 2 losses. 2 losses, 3 wins. Not great odds for being halfway through a tournament. He pretty much needs to win every battle from here on out to make sure he's in the top 4. He can't really get, it's very unlikely he'll finish top of the league. He probably won't, he could maybe finish second, but that depends on what goes on, considering Cynthia and Leon have not faced each other, and make it clear they're not going to face each other until the final round, round 9. From there, Ash gets a victory over Lance, he gets a victory over Diantha, goes into round 8, runs into Nimona. I would have Nimona win this battle. Ash is now on 3 losses. 3 losses, 5 wins, going into the final round. Nimona wins 6-5, make it very tight. They should be very similar, very down, and basically they should lose themselves in this fucking battle. Do the absolute most you can with this. It helps both of them. But Nimona comes out on top here. So going into the last round, Ash's last opponent is Steven. Steven is currently sitting in 3rd on 2 losses, 6 wins. His knockout difference should be lower than Ash's. Should it be lower than Ash's? Yes. His knockout difference should be lower than Ash's, or if it's better than Ash's, it needs to be better by 1. Just 1. Ash is currently in 4th, with a better knockout difference than Nimona, who is in 5th. They are basically the 3 battling for those last 2 spots. Leon and Cynthia had it wrapped up by the end of round 7, both still undefeated, both needing to go up against each other. Final rankings, we'll get to Ash's battle. In 10th, I would have Alan. He's the non-champion, he's the non-former champion in a champion's world. If you want to give him a win, I'd give him the win over Iris. That can help narratively with Iris. If she was expected to get a victory, that's the victory she'd be expected to get. She didn't get it. What does she do now? She needs to prove she's not necessarily a pushover. Iris finishes in 9th. She does get a win. She gets a win over Lance. Lance in turn finishes 8th. He gets a victory over Alan, but that is pretty much the only victory he gets. 1-1-1. Actually, sorry, I'll take that back. He does get 2 wins. I think that's how I had to work it, was he got 2 wins. He beats Alan, he beats Wallace. Wallace is ahead of him on 2 wins, with wins over Alan, and Iris has a better difference. His battle with Steven, which should be, again, 6-5, will fucking help with that. In 6th place is Diantha. Diantha will have 4 wins. She'll have beaten everyone beneath her. That gives her a good leg up, but loses to everyone ahead of her. When it comes to Leon versus Cynthia, draw. Both aces knocked out last, knocked out at the same time. If you want, this is where you can bring out Cynthia's surprise. of being able to Dynamax, and that you could understand whether or not that makes a difference, but that ends a tie. Both finish the tournament undefeated. Cynthia gets the leg up of being the first one to find the chink in Leon's armor. He can fucking bleed. And if he can bleed, we can kill him. But Leon still takes top ranking on the league, having the better knockout difference, leaning into that overwhelming power that he has. Cynthia finishes second, still undefeated. That's a good notch to have. Ash ends up beating Steven in his final battle, beats him 6-4, but both of his last Pokemon that are still standing should be on their last legs. Still that rigid defense that Steven should have, and that damn solid offense. Ash ekes out the victory, and because he gets it by 2, even if Steven's one ahead on knockout difference, Ash will jump over him. I said he was 1 point ahead. He'll be 2 points ahead of Ash going into that match. Ash will be level on points with Steven, but jump over Steven instead. Actually, no, scratch that. Steven's knockout difference should be lower than Ash's, because Nimona's victory in her last part of the tournament, probably against Alan, she will win that 6-3, which puts her knockout difference higher than Steven's. All three finish 6 wins, 3 losses, but Ash takes third, Nimona takes fourth, leaving Steven out of the running on 5th. If you can't get Nimona, I would have Diantha take that spot in 4th. Run the same sort of thing of Diantha jumping up over Steven in the last round. I think that kind of works well. In that regard, Ash beats Diantha. Steven beats Diantha. Diantha beats Ash. Ash beats Steven. Run it that way. Now, if you recall what I said seeding-wise earlier, you'll notice I'm now running Ash versus Cynthia in the semi-final, after going on about how Ash versus Cynthia is probably the better final in the bracket tournament. And I do agree, Ash and Cynthia is the better final. But for the sake of this tournament, you're still running with you're still running with Leon being unstoppable. He has been unstoppable against everyone, even Cynthia, somewhat. At the very least, he hasn't lost. Cynthia again gets the leg up of being the first one to find the chink in the armor, but not enough to take him down. Ash gets the victory over Cynthia, which helps. Again, you can run the Cynthia retirement stuff. Cynthia decides not to retire or to retire, up to you. And then Ash. Leon goes through Nimona, make that one close-ish, 6-4, could work. That would also sell, if Ash lost to Leon 6-4, Nimona's now lost to Leon 6-4, and Nimona beat Ash. If you're going through rock, paper, scissors, Leon should still win this initial matchup, but Ash wins the final. You can effectively run the same final that they did in the anime. Up to you, you can leave that up there, but that's basically how you do it. In both instances, Ash wins, you keep that. It's probably the most useful way to handle the tournament, but you can weave a few more stories in and among stuff. I know it's not a full, this is exactly what you should do, step by step, here's all the narrative intricacies. I don't really have the time to do that right now. Maybe if I write it as a fanfiction at some point, maybe I will, or I might do a later video specifically going through the league format, because that's the one that I've done less narrative work in this video for. Maybe that'll come at some other point. Who knows? Also, if I have gone back and done a full ladder system for it to go through it, that'll be down in the description. Did I do that, editor me? Brilliant, or bollocks. Delete as applicable. But yeah, that's the 2 tournaments done. Bracket and league. So what did you think? Are you happy with that Ash won both? Do you think somebody else should have won both? Is there a bit more narrative work that should be done? What are your thoughts? You could also suggest other entries that I may end up doing for What About This in the future. I am looking to get this done about once a month, hopefully. So in theory, next month's will be 2 videos because I'll be looking to do both the men's and the women's Royal Rumble for WWE, trying to fantasy book that upcoming event. At least the Rumbles themselves, not necessarily the rest of the card. Who knows? But yeah. Until then, as always, I've been StrongLady2. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see me do more Pokemon stuff, I've been doing Nuzlockes on the channel, both Diamond and White. So you can go look for those. I'll probably have those up on the end screens, so you can go there if you want. If you want to find me, links will be down in the descriptions where you can read my stories or just have a chat with me in general if you really want. Otherwise, you can find me on stream or when I put out a video. And yeah, I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye.